Hello, everyone. My name is Salvatore Vieira. I am a field organizer with Equality Florida and an activist in the Central Florida area. I am here today to talk with you about a very important topic, LGBTQ plus life in Florida in 2021. Before I jump into a lot of my spiel, my speech, I wanted to share with you all a video that our organization has put together that I think has a nice tone to set us as we embark on this journey and talk about LGBTQ plus life in Florida in 2021. So bear with me. I'm going to share my screen and get this video playing. So thank you so much for being here today and for welcoming me to the space, allowing me to talk about these very important issues. I wanted to start today by giving you a little bit of a glimpse into who I am and how I got to where I am today. In a sense, my journey, my story of self. So like I said, my name is Salvatore Vieira. I was born and raised in Orlando, Florida. So my entire life, I have lived the experience as a gay, cis, white man in Central Florida, in Orlando, Florida. And it has been quite an experience. I have been very lucky, very blessed throughout my life to have had parents in a family that are very accepting and very loving. However, I didn't come out when I was in high school. It wasn't until I got to college that I really it came out and allowed myself to experience who I truly was. And as I reflect back to it, it's a lot of what I would say is societal pressure. I had this idea that I had to marry a woman, that I had to have a family, and that had to be, with a man and a woman and children. And that's just the idea that I had in my head based on what I think a lot of our society has built us to believe and the life that we quote unquote should have. And so when I finally opened and came out in college, I started to really have a keen eye on injustices. And that's kind of when I started to really get involved in activism. It wasn't until probably 2016 when Donald Trump was elected to be our president. And I started to really notice a shift in the dynamic, especially here in our state in Florida. Like I said, I am a cisgender white gay man. And so while I have faced my own discriminations in life, I also understand that I have a lot of privilege. But something I started to notice after that change, after we had a new president, was that people started to feel emboldened. People started to feel like they could, bring hate to the table, and that's exactly what happened. I remember my now husband and I really love to be adventurous. We go kayaking, we go out and we go hiking, and sometimes in these situations we never feel the safest, I would say. And it wasn't until after 2016 when we started to feel this. We comparing where we were before Donald Trump was elected and to where we were, we just noticed the way we had been treated really had started to change. And so I started to have a keen eye. And another thing that I like to give credit to my support system, my friends. They really worked with me with grace to help me understand my privilege and see how we can do better as ourselves. And that's when I started to really get into activism. In 2019, I went to my first Pride and marched in the parade with Elizabeth Warren's campaign for president, and as a volunteer. And from there, I started my journey in activism. And now I am organizing with Equality Florida. I never thought I'd be doing this. I went to school for musical theater. I love to sing, I love to dance, but something called to me, and it was the passion of helping people, providing equality for all. That has been my what has been fulfilling and what has been incredibly passionate about the work that I'm doing. Organizing and activism is really, really hard work, but I got into it because I really wanted to make a change. I wanted to make our state of Florida a better one. And I am so lucky to be doing that work with Equality Florida. One of the really awesome things I want to jump into before as I talk about LGBTQ plus life in Florida in 2021 is one of the things I really get to do working with Equality Florida, and that's uplifting and amplifying queer voices in leadership. And I want to start here because I don't think that this is something that has been easily achievable in our state, let alone the nation. But establishing leaders who are queer, who do identify as LGBTQ plus, including allies, are so important because representation matters. Representation in all aspects, whether it be politics, whether it be business, whether it be entertainment, having someone that you could look up to and see, wow, that I could be just like that, is just so incredibly important. So when I started with Equality Florida, one of the biggest things that we started to tackle was uplifting and amplifying queer leadership. And we have been able to do just that, and really, really incredibly well. And some things that I wanted to highlight, looking at uplifting and amplifying queer leadership. We have a program called our Equality Captain Program. And in 2021, we now have the strength, capacity, and willingness to develop queer leaders. Some examples are a few of my captains. Amanda LaForge, who has been an incredible activist in their community. They organized 2 rallies in support of transgender youth recently once the governor signed the transgender sports ban into law. Laura Cobb, another fierce activist in the Space Coast area, a brave mother of LGBTQ plus youth that works directly with her community to fight for LGBTQ youth. Another one of our captains who helped to organize an entire rally all by herself. These are folks who have sought opportunity, and we've been able to uplift and amplify them into this leadership place. And that's not something that we've been able to do very easily in the past. And so I wanted to start there and say that while there is a lot to do and a lot to be done, we have achieved so much. Moving on, the next thing I wanted to talk about was something that happened actually back in 2020, the summer of 2020, and then kind of carried over into the beginning of 2021. We had a ruling that the Supreme Court ruled on called Bostock versus Clayton County. And basically this Supreme Court ruling ensured protections for LGBTQ Americans in the workplace. This was a momentous win for our community because basically we could go to work and not have to worry about whether or not our workplace was going to discriminate against us. Now, people may think, oh, that doesn't happen, or, you know, I work with folks who are LGBTQ and they've never been discriminated against. Yet one of the only things that I can vividly remember when that ruling happened was one of my transgender friends who was crying because she was finally going to be able to feel comfortable coming out as transgender in her workplace. And so this was so momentous and important for our community because of just the amount of people who have been living in the shadows up until just last year. Now, fast forward to 2021, Joe Biden has been elected president, and one of the first things Joe Biden did in his presidency was instilling an executive order to implement the Bostock court ruling. This was even more momentous because it not only ensured that states implement the ruling, but it also expanded on the protections. We're now in employment, housing, education, healthcare, and credit. And in some states, you know, folks may have those protections, but in others, like our state, we don't have all of those protections. So this was really exciting, but we didn't know how this was going to happen, how this was going to be implemented. So fast forward a few weeks, it was in February of this year that the Florida Commission on Human Relations recognized President Biden's executive order and instilled protections for LGBTQ plus Floridians in the workplace, in housing, and in public accommodations. This was a huge win for our community in Florida because for the past 15, 20 years, advocacy organizations and people, citizen lobbyists, constituents have been fighting for LGBTQ protections nonstop. One of the legislations that Equality Florida has really worked to push forward is the Florida Competitive Workforce Act. Now, we're going to continue to we're going to continue to push for legislation because what I'm about to talk about is, you know, the importance of legislation versus executive order. Now, while these things are momentous for us in Florida, what an amazing win that we saw. When one thing we know with executive orders are they can be overturned just like that, whether a new president comes in or if a court finds something to be that, you know, it's overturned in the courts. Whereas when it comes to legislation is a lot more strong and a lot more stable and stronger than executive orders. So the next thing I'm going to talk about is the Equality Act. The next biggest thing that we've been pushing is for the Equality Act. The Equality Act has passed the House and we are now working to get it passed in the Senate. The Equality Act is legislation that would instill LGBTQ protections in public accommodations, facilities, the workplace, education, federal funding, employment, housing, credit, and the jury system. Now, you may ask, you know, what's the difference between an executive order and that Biden has implemented and the Equality Act? Like I said, executive orders are not as strong as legislation. So when we have a bill that's put forth, we want to make sure that that bill gets signed into law, because then those protections are on the book and they stem down from a federal level. So every state has to recognize those protections. So that's why it's so important that we pass the Equality Act, because we need to ensure that these protections always stay in place. All right, so the next thing I want to talk about in terms of LGBTQ plus life in Florida in 2021 is the first anti-LGBTQ bill in 24 years. This year, on June 1st, the first day of Pride, our governor signed into law the transgender sports ban. What this law does is it bans transgender girls from playing school sports from middle school to college. And I'm only stating this because this is fact, that every Republican voted for this bill. And I'm going to say this again. This is the first anti-LGBTQ plus bill in Florida in 24 years. It's almost a quarter of a century. Before I talk more about this bill, and before I go into, I have some statistics and things like that, I wanted to share a video, which is a video of Representative Michelle Rayner on the Florida House speaking as the House is passing the anti-trans sports ban.
Yesterday, we had an in-depth discussion about the most troubling aspects of this bill. And members of the majority stayed silent. And please understand, as with HB1, silence is complicity. Silence is approval, and your silence will be marked in history. And that is the kind of history that we will look back on ashamed. We talked about genital examinations, and I know for a fact if any member's child would be subjected to what this bill suggests, y'all would be raising sand. You would hire the best attorney and you would fight this bill. You know the harm, you know the danger. I have not heard a good answer. When I asked the bill sponsor, I asked you, I said, when we're talking about examinations, you indicated you would accept the FHSAA's guidance, but yet their guidance isn't good enough when we're talking about this bill, so you have to make it make sense to me, because it doesn't make any sense. If we pass this bill in this House, please understand, we're legislating state-sanctioned sexual assault against children. When I raised my amendment about Black and brown girls, it wasn't just to have an amendment. I talked about how Black trans girls, their lives often end in violence. They end in murder. They have a life expectancy of 34 years. And I was speaking of Brayla Stone at 17 years old, murdered, killed because she was trans. And yet with this bill is codifying into law the ability for academic settings in schools to be able to bully and to harm our most vulnerable children. Children are children, transgender, cisgender, and they deserve to be loved, supported, and honored for who they are. They deserve childhoods filled with joy and wonder. And I submit to you, our trans children deserve even more because they are our most vulnerable. So I will say this, I know this bill is gonna pass, but we shall overcome, because the arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice.
So once again, that was Representative Michelle Rayner, who is the first out Black queer woman elected to any elected office in the state of Florida. That's something. In the state of Florida in 2021 LGBTQ plus life, we saw the first out Black queer woman elected to office, which is incredibly exciting. But like I said, we have a long way to go. Now, I showed you that that clip because this is what we've spent our first half of the year fighting. Um, I am so sorry to get political. Well, I'm not sorry, because this is what is happening right now in our state. We are having to fight attacks um, to our community left and right for politicians who are trying to gather political points. Literal children have been attacked. Transgender children are are as of August going to not be allowed to participate in school sports. And I just want to anchor in that and say that again, because these are children, what transgender or cisgender, we have taken rights away from children because we want to fire up a base of supporters before an election. And it's really sad to be seeing this in our state. I want to go over some statistics with y'all, mainly surrounding youth. And these are, I'm so sorry, these are national statistics, but I think we can look at this from a lens of being Floridians, knowing the troubles, some of the troubles that our LGBTQ plus Floridians have faced. 42% of LGBTQ youth seriously considered attempting suicide in the past year, including more than half of transgender and non-binary youth. 12% of white youth attempted suicide, compared to 31% of Native Indigenous youth, 21% of Black youth, 21% of multiracial youth, 18% of Latinx youth, and 12% of Asian Pacific Islander youth. 94% of LGBTQ youth reported that recent politics negatively impacted their mental health. That one I want to stress more so, because like I said, these politicians are using children in their political games, and they are being affected negatively because of it. Just in that statistic alone, 94% of LGBTQ youth reported that recent politics negatively impacted their mental health. 48% of LGBTQ youth reported they wanted counseling from a mental health professional, but were unable to receive it in the past year. 30% of LGBTQ youth experienced food insecurity in the past month. 75% reported that they had experienced discrimination based on their sexual orientation or gender identity at least once in their lifetime. In terms of pronouns, transgender and non-binary youth who reported having pronouns respected by all of the people they lived with attempted suicide at half the rate of those who did not have their pronouns respected by anyone with whom they lived. Transgender and non-binary youth who were able to change their name and or gender marker on legal documents such as driver's licenses and birth certificates reported lower rates of attempting suicide. There's a pattern here. When we support our youth and show our youth that we love and care about them, then they do better. We don't see as much of our youth attempting suicide just because of the simple use of pronouns, recognizing that this individual would like to be addressed as they, them, and just saying, yes, of course, I will do that. That saves lives. And I just wanted to note some of these things. In terms of adults, the biggest thing I wanted to note, and Michelle Rayner, Representative Michelle Rayner said it in the video we just watched, the average lifespan of a Black trans woman in our country is 34. And that very much does align with our state, the state of Florida. We've actually seen an uprise in the attacks against transgender Floridians in the past year. So I wanted to talk about these things because this is what we're dealing with right now. We have gotten so much. We have we have marriage equality. Like I said, Biden's executive order and the Florida Commission on Human Relations implementing that executive order have established protections for LGBTQ plus Floridians that we've been fighting for years. And so I think it's really important to know that, be proud of that, and move forward and work to live our lives as fully as we can. But I also think it's so important to know that we have so much work to do. The last thing I wanted to say before I moved into my last little bit here is I've not only seen, I've had folks come to me who are transgender and talk about how they're rushing to schedule their gender affirming surgeries this year because they're afraid with how the trans sports ban was signed into law that we'll see medical bans, and we'll see more bans that just take rights away from our transgender Floridians. And it's just so sad to see our Floridians living in fear. So what can we do? There's so much we can do, and that's what's so exciting about advocacy and getting involved. Take action. Know what candidates are running in your area. You can go on Google and search, find my representative or find my state legislator. You type in your address and it'll tell you exactly who they are. And then I want you to do something. I want you to find out who your legislators are, and then search the transgender sports ban and see who voted for that bill. I'm gonna give you a hint. Every Republican has voted for that bill. If they voted for that bill, what we're gonna do is we're gonna vote them out. Find out what candidates are gonna run against them. Get involved, knock on doors, make calls. There's so many ways to get involved, even if it's with your local LGBTQ organizations. We have groups like PFLAG, which do a lot of important work on educating people, working with parents of LGBTQ youth. So I urge y'all to do your research and get involved, because the only way we're going to really achieve true equality is if we all work together, come together, and fight the hate. I want to thank you all so much for listening to me today. And I hope that I've given you information that is new to you, that gives you fire and passion to want to get involved to fight for LGBTQ life in Florida, because like I said, we've achieved so much, but there's still so much more to go. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful day, and yeah, thanks for having me.